Well, I've got to bring up one thing before we go any further, an update. Somebody we left out. We also talked on the Drive-Thru about teenage prodigies in wrestling. We were talking about who was the best 18-year-old wrestler ever in the business. We mentioned Terry Gordy, and that led to a few names being discussed. And of course, part of this was obviously for us is embarrassing that we overlooked these two names, but then nobody can really go back and see because there's no video existing. But Ray Stevens and Bobby Shane, as far as teenage prodigies that were great performers at an early age and used in prominent positions. Bobby Shane was the boy wonder. Ray Stevens was on top in Ohio before he was 18.
I thought of Ray Stevens after the fact, and a few people got in touch. I did not think of Bobby Shane, of course, the father of Rhonda Shane. I did not think of Bobby Shane before. That's a pretty good one. What about Dick Steinborn?
Well, I don't know if there's no way to tell because there's no video. I saw Dick Steinborn, in his adult years working, and he was very good. But I think that Dick Steinborn at 18 was just used because he was Milo Steinborn's son, the, exciting young amateur wrestling fellow. I don't know if he was, traveling from territory to territory getting used on top.
What about Bobby?
I don't want to sully the but that doesn't really count in what we were talking about. But Bobby Davis was a prodigy as a manager back when there was actually hardly any managers to steal from to begin with. So he had to invent it as he went. But that's different than being who's the best 18-year-old wrestler.
Do you think, from your experience, everyone you've seen, everything you've been around, but applying it to the modern era today, do you think it's possible for a wrestler to hit 20 and mentally be developed enough to be that you wouldn't think they're 20? I mean, do you think it's possible for someone to really be a young age today and be just a super prodigy and super developed in all these things?
I didn't meet MJF until he was 22 or whatever, but I assume he thought mostly the same way when he was 19 or 8 or whatever. Thinking of somebody past him that it might have been possible. Nobody, it's not even the guy's fault, the young aspiring wrestler's fault anymore that they don't get it early because most people don't get it at all anymore, wrestling, and just the reason behind wrestling. And MJF was a prodigy in that he not only studied this and looked at things on YouTube or read or whatever he did and went to wrestling school at a young age, but also that he absorbed this and he's sharp enough with this stuff to have almost figured out how to connect the dots between what people told him and figure out the rest. But most of the time you got that from not only working in the territory 7 nights a week in the ring with somebody that was already a veteran in the business, if you were being used in a spot, but also being in the locker room with them and a bunch of different ones in the locker room. You'd be in the locker room with, 10 or 20 guys, depending on whether they were separate locker rooms or not. You'd only be in the ring with 1 or 2 a night, but you'd be in the locker room and in the cars on, hundreds of mile trips every fucking day with you driving and the fucking veteran in the back telling you what the fuck to do or what not to do or what a dumb fuck you were. That doesn't exist anymore. I think that's why it takes so much longer, if they ever do, for people to figure out the bit. And by the time that they go to wrestling school, they believe they know what the fuck because they've read, fucking nedswrestlingnews.com, where he tells them all the secrets of wrestling and how everything works and what everybody thinks. So it's harder because of that, because there's the former method of learning how to think about wrestling, not just how to do. There's more places than ever in the history of wrestling to learn how to do wrestling moves, and fewer places than ever to learn how to actually think about what wrestling is and how to do it.
When you think of some of the teenagers you had in OVW, a Ken Doane, Randy Orton, Rene Dupree, did you see something in them early on that...
Mondo was 19. when he came to the first tryout camp. He'd already been training for about a year up in New York.
Was it that you saw potential that could be developed, or you thought, wow, they've got it already, you just got to fine tune it, and it didn't have, like, what, when you look at teenage prodigies, or at least teenagers in wrestling that you look at and think, wow, what they could be, where did it go wrong with some of the guys, you think?
Yeah. Well, the first question you almost asked, no, nobody had everything. John Cena had the look and the intellect and the promo and he understood wrestling because his father was a fan. So he'd grown up, but his work was not, it was good for that period, but it wasn't developed yet. Nobody had everything. Everybody always had some place or some aspect they needed to develop. And a lot of times with some of the guys, you could see that they got the physical part more quickly than the mental part. And I'm not talking about, that they're stupid or anything. The mental part of wrestling is understanding what wrestling is at its root, and its conflict, and it's making things make sense. And
there are plenty of stupid people that actually get that.
Yes. But at the same time, you had guys who were natural. Again, I've said MJF is a natural. Randy Orton was a natural at selling, or not a natural, rather at selling to begin with. He just kind of slumped over and, did it. But then later on it came. But also he didn't have that flamboyant personality at first. He was, he would act up more out of the ring than in the ring, unfortunately. He was because he was still 19. But so sometimes these things are, the personality blooms late or whatever. But you would see when you did tryout camps, or when you had a guy around for a period of time, or you did a camp and then he came back again the next year, the people that were applying themselves to how to think about it rather than just do more moves or just whatever, that were applying how to think and how to get over and how to make their matches make sense, or call attention to themselves because of their personality, or change their look in some kind of way for the better, or whatever. That's something that you look for in terms of whether a guy's going to get better or not. But you have to be able to identify the potential to begin with. Is this my show?
Is there any potential in this show here today? That's the big question.
All right. Well, Wolf, I'll tell you what there is potential in. There is a potential for one of you folks out there, the people, the cult of Cornette within the sound of my voice, to have a personalized video message from me very shortly. Because the St. Valentine's Day Mass of Cameos are coming up quickly. It's next Saturday, January 28th at noon Eastern time. We're going to put up the Cameo video personalized messages. You can either go to cameo.com/Jim Cornette, or just go to jimcornette.com and click on the Cameo button. It takes you directly to the page. And we're going to, as we've mentioned, Hotchkiss Featherbottom, my ace videographer, has 2 days that week that we have devoted shooting these. So there is going to be a maximum of 80 on sale on Saturday, January 28th at noon Eastern. We haven't done them in a year, so I don't know. People may have forgotten about me by now, but they usually go pretty quick. So I want to encourage everybody, if you want one, to act fast, and just let me know what you want to do. I can either send somebody a nice Valentine's Day heart and flowers, or I can stick Cupid's arrow up their ass.
Really roast me. That's my favorite one you got.
Well, you got to give me something to work with, folks. Though, again, as I've really roast him or really roast me, you don't need to write a book. We're not talking about a soliloquy here, but just some information on either the kind, gentle, loving better half or spouse or paramour or significant other that you would like to kiss for Valentine's Day, or the obnoxious, cretinous, humanoid piece of shit that you would like me to blister. Whichever one, I'll do either. And as I mentioned on the Drive-Thru, I'll say anything that's not illegal, although in some cases we may be able to thinly veil some of these threats of violence and or criminal conduct, where that I couldn't be charged with anything. We'll just have to see how that goes. But anyway, that's going to happen. And while you're at JimCornette.com, check out the brand new Lazy Booking t-shirts, the Jim Cornette face shirts that have been restocked, the final copies, or not copies, but the final examples of the Raw debut variant Jim Cornette action figure, and all more kinds of stuff like that, all personally autographed by myself, myself, and I, all three of us, and handled, one hand each, by Fanny and Felcher Featherbottom, directly to you, the customers at Cornette's Collectibles. That's at JimCornette.com.